Adrian Knight is a serial entrepreneur who has had over 10 startups and now mainly focuses on acquiring, growing and restructuring businesses. From his early struggles, including a nervous breakdown and addiction, Adrian has risen to become a powerhouse in the world of entrepreneurship. In this episode, you will learn about how to acquire companies and get a deep understanding of the hardships that may come with it. You'll hear about Adrian's journey exploring personal development, business triumphs, and the wisdom he's gained along the way.
So when I was 15, I was obese. I was significantly overweight, and I remember we was on holiday up in Scotland in Loch Ness, and we was all just jumped in the car. We'd gone away with some family friends, and I'd left my jumper in the log cabins we were staying in, and I ran in to pick up my jumper, and as I ran past the mirror, I sort of glanced at myself from my side, side view, and it stopped me in my tracks. And looking back at me was this person who I didn't recognise. It was me, but I was significantly overweight, and it's the first time I'd ever really seen myself like that. I'd never seen myself as overweight. I knew I was a little bit on the bigger side, but not to that extent, and it just completely startled me in my tracks. And I picked up my jumper and I got back in the car and we went off to where we was going, and it was playing on my mind, and it was a real shake, I guess, a shake of my soul. And we got to where we was going, and we was out to do some just outdoor adventure and stuff. And I was walking along and I was like, this isn't me. I'm going to drop this weight. And I made that decision. And so as I turned 16, I was in that process, and within a period of 10 months, I lost, I think it was the best part of 8 stone. It was significant, but I had transformed. So all of a sudden I was 16, soon to be leaving school, and I was a different person, and all of a sudden I was getting the attention of girls for the first time, and I was going into this phase where I was finally getting some freedom, because at school I was always, people said that I was intelligent, but I never applied it because I was bored. I've got ADHD, and so I always done just the bare minimum to pass. I was that sort of lower grade C student, but I could have been higher, and that I had a few experiences in college where that sort of proved itself. But leaving school, I was literally a new person, and I found myself with a new social circle, and I was loving it. I was absolutely loving life. And for the next 2 years over college, it was the same principle. We had great times. I was the first to pass my driving tests. I had everyone in my car. But I had this urge to get out and explore the world, and I wanted to drop out of college to go and just do my own thing. But my dad convinced me, I don't know how, but he convinced me to stay, to see through my exams. And so the compromise I made was, my final exam was, I'll never forget this, it was 4 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. That was my final exam in mathematics. And by 9 a.m. the next morning, on the Wednesday morning, I was in Paris having breakfast. And I spent basically the whole summer traveling Europe, and I went to 12 different countries, and I'd planned out this big itinerary of, well, these are the places I'm going to go and it's all I'm going to do. But I was so excited, I ended up doing that full itinerary within 4 weeks. And so I found myself at Rome train station, central train station in Rome, at the end of this 4 weeks, having done everything on my plan, with this ticket, an Interrail ticket, so I could travel anywhere in Europe, just jump on. And I was like, where do I want to go? And I was looking up at the board, I was like, do I want to go to Switzerland or Austria? And that was when the trip started for me. It was when the plan had been dropped, and I just went with my instincts and went with the flow, and it was just the most phenomenal experience. So I came back from that on a high, and again I was a completely different person. I'd made a list of all of the things I was going to do when I got back, because you had so much time to reflect and introspect. And I was coming back, and I was coming back into an apprenticeship as a bricklayer, and I was really looking forward to it, because I've always wanted to build things. I've always wanted to build, and I've always loved property, so I couldn't wait to get started in this apprenticeship. But the reality of that was very different to what I had in my mind, and it was a complete mismatch. And I found myself starting to smoke a lot of marijuana. I was completely associated with the role, and I wasn't even there a year. It was about 10 months, and at the end of that 10 months I got signed off because I'd had a nervous breakdown by my doctor. And that was the point in which I remember they prescribed me like various forms of medication. I wasn't sleeping, so I had sleeping tablets. And I remember sitting on my bed at my parents' house with the tablets in one hand, looking at them thinking, I don't want to go this route. I want to figure this out myself. And so I didn't take a single tablet, but that started a journey for me of like, I was truly at rock bottom, and having gone from such a high the previous year, and it started this journey of building myself up brick by brick. And it was the process was very much, you add a brick, you add another brick, and then they both fall down, so you have to start again and again. And it was just that pattern really, until I started to find my way a little bit in my as I sort of turned 20. So
yeah, I mean, I can completely relate to that whole idea of, if I tried harder in school I would have done better, because I had the exact same thing where teachers are like, Sam, if you just tried a little bit harder you could become an A grade student. I'm like, I don't even want to be here. Like, I don't see the point in any of this. And I unfortunately was pushed to do A levels. I say unfortunately, I got good enough grades to do A levels, got good enough grades to go to uni and all that kind of stuff. But at that point where you said you started disassociating and smoking a lot of weed, that is definitely the same kind of thing that I did, because you just want all the thoughts in your head to kind of slow down, and you want to chill and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's part of that, going from the high of all that traveling and seeing the world to coming back and being a bricklayer, and life suddenly slows down. I had that same feeling, but in a way that I thought I was going to be doing all this, crazy big stuff. And I slowly saw the walls closing in of, okay, you go to uni, you get a job, you work this job for the next 30 years. And it didn't help that I was studying something really boring like accounting and finance. And, in your world, you was bricklaying. To go from traveling around the world to bricklaying is a big, big transition. And it's not normally two things that go together. Normally the type of person that travels the world wants to continue traveling the world or wants to work for themselves. And I think it's one of those things where, when you're in that kind of low state or that rock bottom, like you said, you don't really know what the next step is. You don't really know what you're going to do. So you kind of just do what's there. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
once you've kind of gone through this process of a, transformational thing of going from obese to in shape, traveling around the world, bricklaying, doesn't quite work out. And, you're sat there with these pills and you're like, right, I'm not taking these. I'm going to level up. I'm going to go to the next level, because right now I'm at the bottom. And something that a lot of people don't know is rock bottom also has a basement that you that you can slip into. But what was that process like of, building yourself up and coming out of that space where, you are in a vulnerable state? What did you do? What was the kind of business or career move that you decided to make at that time as a 20-something-year-old man?
So I was just coming up to turning 20, and my girlfriend, my first proper girlfriend, she was going to university, and it had dawned on me that she was going to university and I was staying there in a job like an apprentice that I hated. And it just made me realise, it really broke me actually, and it just made me realise that I don't want to be doing this. And so I ended up going to university as well. I applied for different universities. I got accepted to study architecture at Bristol University, but then decided against that because I couldn't see myself studying for 7 years to then be doing that job for the rest of my life. So I ended up going to university that was actually fairly close to home to study construction management. So I was sort of more of a project manager on the building site. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool, I can deal with that. So I went to university and I lasted 3 weeks, and there was a couple of reasons for that. The first was I had learned through my travels, and I'd learned through that experience as a bricklayer, and I was still at rock bottom here, but I had learned that it just didn't make any sense to me to be doing things that you didn't like because it was the norm to do them. And I saw this at university, where there were so many of my friends who were in degrees that hated doing it, but they stuck it out for the 3 years. And I respect the persistence, but I also think there's a little bit of insanity in some of the cases there. Not all of them, but some of the cases. And that just wasn't me. So I was looking around in this construction management course and finding out more about this career path. I was like, I do not see myself doing this for the next 40 years of my life. I just do not see myself doing it. But I had simultaneously started a little business in those first 3 weeks at university, which was it was just before Facebook. So it was a student advertising business. So we used to go around the student nights and take loads of photos of people out, and then we'd stick them onto our website, give everybody like a business card, like go to the website, see your photos. But at the same time, we had already approached local businesses and said, hey, do you want to attract loads of students? You can pay to advertise on our website, and it worked. And so within the 3 weeks, that had got going quite quickly. And I just made a decision that I wasn't going to continue with my course, but I was going to continue doing this student thing because I didn't really have anything else to do. And that evolved to the point where I actually ended up staying at university for 3 years. So I left when all my friends were leaving, but I wasn't studying. I was living the student life. In many ways, I was living a better life because that student advertising business had evolved to, we started running the event nights, and then we were running every major event night, student event night in Reading, where the university was. So 4 nights a week. Plus we had the advertising, plus we had a paid weekly column in the Reading Chronicle where one of my friends wanted to be a writer, write it. And so it was this great little operation, and it should have been so much more fun than it was for me. Like, a lot of my friends were having the time of their life because they always got the VIP treatment, and the bars would give us like crates of free alcohol. So you were like one of the most popular people in the year, but it was like the last thing I wanted. I just wanted to be locked up in my room, basically. And there was this real inner conflict, and there were times I remember there's like parties going on downstairs and people knocking on the door saying come down, and I physically couldn't open the door, I couldn't look them in the eye, yet I was there promoting these student nights. It was such a weird sense, like it was 2 different extremes, and that was really challenging. It was really challenging, and it was a shame because it could have been absolutely amazing, but it wasn't. Like, it was good, but it was highlighting all of the weaknesses and all of the work that I had to do. And and I sort of gradually started to again build myself up, sort of brick by brick. I had a few more bricks by this point than when I first was sort of still in the apprentice bricklayer, but I still was far from right. And I remember my best mate saying to me, like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just snap out of it? He just had no concept of, like, it's the depression and the desire to be a hermit, a recluse, really, to try and figure this out. So it was a weird experience. I'm not quite sure. I feel there's a deeper meaning to it, and I feel like I'm still figuring out what that was. I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but yeah, I still feel there's something deeper to that.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And the thing is with being a first-time entrepreneur is you don't really know up from down or left from right. You're kind of just doing everything, and what works sticks type thing. And for you realized that the kind of thing you were doing just wasn't sitting well with you, or you just weren't enjoying it so much. So talk to me about the process of getting out of that business, or kind of closing that business down, and then what you did after that. Because as much as you could have stayed running that and, maybe sold it, I get a feeling that you kind of just was like, right, I'm on to the next thing, as opposed to, thinking of it as an asset that it was type thing.
It was pretty much like that. So I didn't want to be that 30-year-old still hanging around with students who are 19, 20. It just felt a little bit weird for me. So I'd already earmarked, and I sat down and thought about this. It's like, there is a business here that could be built, and do I want to grow this into something bigger, like a national student business, and have more of an organisation behind it? But I just felt like that I just couldn't see myself doing that. So the process of moving on from that was actually quite straightforward. It was quite simple. And yeah, it was a case of just tying up some of the loose ends and moving on, really. And I had decided that there was quite a few lessons I wanted to take from that. There's quite a few lessons that I had learned from that experience, personal and professional. But I also recognised that there were skills that I needed to develop as well. So, like quite a few of my friends, I decided to go into recruitment, specifically IT recruitment, primarily because I wanted to sharpen my business development skills and learning how to sell to businesses.
Talk to me about the kind of IT transition. What was that like for you to go from a job that kind of had, more of a relationships based kind of model to now working in tech, essentially?
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it, and I thrived really quickly in that. So I joined as a trainee. I got promoted within. It was within. How long was it? I mean, it was a couple of months. It was really fast, and then 18 months later, I was leading the one of the teams there. So a small group of people, and I really enjoyed that time. I really enjoyed that time. I mean, it was definitely a bit sharky. We like recruitment, but that kind of goes with the territory, I guess. And that in itself was quite a few sort of learning lessons. But again, I learned what I wanted to learn from that particular phase, and I actually ended up like coming back to recruitment a couple of times over the years. So I left that role because I wanted to do some more travelling, and I went out to Thailand and Australia. But it was a very different experience to when I travelled Europe. Europe was a real elation, but I was still battling with this depression and this sort of like low confidence, and it was just remarkable considering I was sort of in an environment where you had to be really confident, and the ones who were confident succeeded. Like I succeeded, but I wasn't the confident one. It was so weird. But that trip, it was deep, if I'm honest. I was highly reclusive, didn't really engage with many people. I was soul searching. I was trying to understand what it was I was meant to do, and I just couldn't figure it out. And there was the other side of I just wasn't confronting some of the inner challenges and the inner work I needed to be doing as well. So my solution was to run away from me by going to the other side of the world where no one knew me, and to hope that it would get better, but it didn't.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hard thing, isn't it? When you're in that kind of state of you're doing all right, you're doing better than you once were, but you still don't feel happy with who you are or what you're doing, right? So you kind of go on this journey of self-discovery, and for some people, even though you already done the whole, say drink and drugs thing, for some people it's traveling. So you kind of like, okay, cool, I'm going to travel the world, and along the way I'll find myself. And I'm wondering, because before we started recording, you mentioned you had 12 startups at one point. You've run through 12 startups. Did you have any of these kind of startup ideas while you were traveling, or were they kind of things that you decided once you came back and were kind of in a rut?
Yeah, it was more so I had when I left my recruitment job, I technically started my first startup, and that got off to a good start, but then I essentially got distracted and took my eye off the ball with that and went to the next shiny object, which I've always sort of regretted to a degree, because I wonder where that would have went. And that was like an internet based business. I was really into the internet, like the internet side of things, and so the next one was still internet based, but I had this idea that I didn't have to be in the UK doing it, which is a valid idea, but there's also the reality of it's quite hard to travel and build a startup at the same time. Like you kind of need to focus on it's like one or the other, like at least get the startup going and then travel, but I was trying to do both at the same time. So I came back because I just had that insight that as much as I love traveling, and to this day I thrive off traveling, I wanted to build a business. I wanted to build. It goes back to why I joined as a bricklayer. I just had this urge to build, and that's probably the one insight that came from my travels away. So I came back to the UK. I didn't go back into employment. I didn't go back into employment for, well, I say even when it was till my latter 20s, so the best part of 7-8 years. And even then, when I sort of took a corporate role, because by this time, like, my 11th startup had failed or something, and I had no money. Even that was a contract. But yeah, when I came back from that travel, it was, I'm going to figure this out. And I essentially started doing some like marketing, because I've taken a lot of the stuff I learned from the student businesses. But the challenge that I had again was I still had this underlying depression and this like severe low confidence, and I was starting to recognize some of these addictions that were starting to rear their head a lot more than I had recognized maybe a couple of years earlier. So I was trying to get these businesses going and trying to do stuff, but I was getting in the way of me in from so many different angles, and yeah, it was very hard to accept that. Very, very hard to accept that.
Yeah. And so you're kind of blowing through these startups in your 20s. You're like, right, I don't want to work for anybody. I'm going to work for myself. And you get to this point where you're like, okay, forget that. That's not working. But you did eventually get to a point where you started a business with a reason or with a purpose, and it started to kind of fly. It started to kind of work. Talk me through that business in particular, because, you know, we could sit here for hours and hours talking about the other 11 or 12, but
Yeah.
you know, this is the one that I believe started you off on the kind of track you're on now.
Yeah. So when I was in my late 20s, I got offered a contract working for a big sort of global blue chip company, but the same guy actually who I was at university with and told me to snap out of it. Like, why can't I just snap out of it? Is it like, it's crazy how things work? And so I took that contract because I needed some money. Like, I just didn't have any money, and I was just coming up to 30, and I had this sense on what I wanted to do. Like, I'd become particularly interested in like franchising and the franchise sector. I just love the idea of taking something that works and replicating it. And I had identified like a model that I quite liked, which was helping people transition out of their jobs into franchising. I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And I sort of had that in mind, but I was also very conscious that I was having this great time working in this corporate role. And when I was like right on the brink of turning 30, I just sort of had a conversation with myself and was like, you're just about to turn 30, you're no longer in your 20s, you've got no mortgage, no family, no major commitments. If you're going to do this entrepreneurial thing, you have to do it now. Now's the time. And so it was quite a hard decision because I truly loved that role, that contract. I loved it. I was having so much fun and sort of making good money as well. But I decided that no, I wanted to be true to myself. So I left that, moved back into my parents' house, and started what was my, as it turns out, my last sort of like startup that was semi-successful. And that was a business that helps people transition out of corporate life into business ownership through franchising. So having a pre-set out business model for them to go into. And I was building that for about 6 years. I had a team of people that was around about 8-9 people by the very end of it. But the problem was I wasn't making any money. Like, it was just about washing its face. And in the early days, it's like, I'm going to work even harder and push even harder and keep going. But it just started to dawn on me that, where's this going? Like, you're not getting in, you're putting so much in. I was working so long and so hard on this and getting nothing. And it was when I found out that I was going to be a dad to my daughter Evie, that was when I stopped and I was like, something needs to change here. Like, something needs to change. And that was the point in which I got started onto the path I am now. And really, like, I look at my daughter Evie and I'm like, it's so funny because for years I ran away from relationships and the idea of the responsibility of fatherhood because I wanted successes in the business world, but actually it was being in a relationship and being a father that has given me that success. Like, the irony is never lost on me. But it's yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's apparently one of the secrets to entrepreneurship is, in effect, having a supportive partner. So having somebody that you can kind of
Yeah.
bounce ideas off or build yourself up with, and that could be a co-founder, but it can also be a romantic partner or a wife or that type of thing. And there's also this element of, as a man, when you have a child, you have this kind of feeling of like, oh no, I need to kind of get my stuff together. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
not a feeling that I'm aware of just yet because I don't have any children, but I've heard it, countless times from other people. It's like, when I had my son, or when I had my daughter, or when my wife got pregnant, or when I found out about this, that, I suddenly decided that I need to, like, either get going or go work hard, like go work 24 hours a day for somebody else and just make this money type thing. So you heard you were having your daughter, and you realized that at some point she would need childcare. I'm guessing here this is how this kind of went down. So you're guessing at one point, or you're saying to yourself at one point, okay, she's going to need childcare, and you thought, well, I don't want to pay someone else. Why don't I just start my own childcare business? Or is that not how it went down?
It was slightly different. So my aspirations, I've always wanted to build a sizable business. I've known that. And my aspirations has always been, for some unbeknown reason, to build a group of companies. Like, I've always had this idea of this group, and I tried doing it with my startup, but for various reasons it didn't quite work out in terms of the type of group I was looking to build. And then I discovered that I was expecting Evie, and ever since my teenage years, I can't explain why, but I've always had this idea that I was going to buy and sell businesses. Like, that just felt like me, even though I knew no one who done that. There's very few sort of like the more celebrity business people now, people like Richard Branson and Peter Jones and all of that. There's no one out there doing that. I don't even know where I got the idea from, but I was convinced that was me, and that's what I wanted to do. But I felt like I needed some experience before going into that world. And so when I found out I was expecting Evie, I basically spent a lot of time reflecting on what type of dad I wanted to be, what type of role model I wanted to be, what I wanted to do, how I wanted to manage myself. And I came to the conclusion that nothing had changed with my aspirations. If anything, I felt even more ambitious. But the time was now. So that got me started on the path I'm on, which is of acquiring and turning around and selling companies. And I've done a little bit of training, and I just went full pelt, and it's like 100 miles an hour. And I acquired my first company within 3 months of going through the training. And I had a great experience. I loved it. And it was just mad to me that I'd spent all of these years having so many failed startups, and even the one that was semi-successful, although I think is more accurately a semi-failure in many ways, yet overnight I had acquired this fully working operational business that had everything figured out that I couldn't figure out before, but it had a few problems. But I could see the problems, and I knew how to fix them. I just kind of knew how to fix them. And so that was really interesting to me. And a lot of those problems were fixed within 3 months of buying the business. So within 6 months, I'd gone from a complete newbie to having acquired a business, a 30-year-old company, and fixing the main problems in it. I was like, this is pretty cool. And at this point, we had just gone into full lockdown in the UK. So the first wave of lockdowns. And we had still been... just prior to lockdown, we'd still been going to the children's groups with Evie, and so I had this sort of probably the most successful business taste I'd had to date, in my life, just fresh in my mouth. And we were going to these children groups, and I was really sort of engaging and just fascinated by this little girl who was my daughter. And as I started to look around this world, it just felt really disjointed. It just felt like, oh, this is not the experience I thought. I thought the businesses here in the children's world, because it's children, I thought they had everything lined up. But man, it was the complete opposite. It was so disorganized and flaky, and I just felt like, I don't know. I just felt like there might be something more there. That's what got my curiosity going. But then over the summer of 2020, when everyone was in lockdown, myself, like a lot of other people, spent a lot of time, reflecting on life, and I was doing a lot of running and just going out and just enjoying that fabulous hot summer we had then. And I just again recognised that if I was going to work this hard in business, it had to be more than just money. Like, there had to be more to it, because don't get me wrong, I like money, but it doesn't motivate me the way I thought it did. In many ways, I don't really care about it. Like, I just don't care about it, but I'd always been fascinated by using business as a vehicle for driving change. But I never knew where to point that. So I'd never really explored it. But then coming into this new world as a dad and seeing it from like the customer's perspective, and then having this recent success of buying and turning around a company, and then like thinking, oh, this could be the area where that sort of like social, like it all came together for me. And so I made a decision it was just after Evie turned 1, August 2020. I said to myself, I'm going to move into the sector. I don't care. I've got no aspirations. I've got no agenda. I don't care. I just want to play a part, however small that is. I just am doing it like for me, because at the centre of this is it's about the kids, and I just want to do what I can to help shape their lives and their education. And everyone around me was like, are you mad? This is a complete 180 to everything that we've been doing, and it's just a completely different world. We don't know anything. I was like, I don't care. Like, this is more than just commercial reasons. There's a deeper purpose to this. And it's amazing, really, because after all those years of trying, all of those failed startups, even the semi-failure as well, the loss, everything, having made that decision about this is something more than just the commercials. Fast forward 2 years, we're multi-million revenue, we've got just under 20 employees, we're educating just under 10,000 under 5-year-olds each academic term in the UK, and we barely got started. It just blows my mind, and I look back on that and I think just wow, like, it's when you come at things from a slightly different intent and you have that why, as we're talking about at the start of the show, the why we're doing things, that why is the center of everything that we're doing. And I've learned a lot from that. And so with other areas of my life, I've started looking at it thinking, what is my why here? And it's as Simon Sinek in his book, you start with why. Like, it's so true. You figure out the why, and the rest just kind of falls into place.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right there. And it's something that a lot of big businesses do and a lot of small businesses do very well, which is focus on the customer or the client experience. If you focus on that, it's not like you can't lose, because there's other things you have to get right as well. But if that is what you're focused in on, then things are going to go a lot better. So we kind of went a long distance before we even started the kind of crux of the conversation. But buying and selling businesses, that is what you do at this current moment in time. And you're currently only focused on the childcare sector. Is that correct?
So in the world of buying and selling businesses, there's multiple strategies you can take. Lots of different ways you can approach it, depending on what your goals are. With the children's businesses, the goal is very much to acquire. In most cases, they are underperforming businesses, so they're being bought, they're being fixed, but then they're being fixed with a long-term view of this isn't being sold. This is part of a much bigger picture here, and that has taken shape quite nicely. And I'm very fortunate to have engineered things so that I'm not involved at all day to day. There's a team of people far more capable than I am of running those businesses and doing the things I'm not very good at, which is great because it gives me a lot more bandwidth. So the children's businesses are very much a buy and hold type approach, but I also my skill set is the turnaround. It's the acquisition and the turnaround. So I love going into underperforming businesses and solving the problems with an eye to, I'm going to go in, solve these problems, and then I'm going to hand it over, so essentially sell it to someone who's got the aspirations to run this better ship, like this slightly better vehicle than it would have been. And a lot of the businesses I look at are just going into, they're not at bankruptcy. They're a few steps before that, but they know that they've got about 6 to 12 months before they sort of reach that. And so with my time, I do a lot of different things. I do a lot of sort of athletic stuff, but from a business perspective, I look at those opportunities and I choose the right ones where I feel I can actually, do this, and I go in, and it's normally the process is normally like lasts anywhere from a couple of months up to sort of 6 months or so, like the turnaround piece, depending on what he's doing. My last one, my acquisition, was a much more lengthier one. That's some major problems that I just didn't see when I went in, and I'm in the process of exiting that business. So we're due to close the end of the month, which is next Friday. I think it might go back a week, but we're nearly there. So, and I do that because I love the thrill of it. It's financially rewarding, and it's also, from a lifestyle perspective, it's pretty cool because it's normally an intense few months, and then you exit and it's like radio silence, and you can have a bit more balance, and you can enjoy other things, but then when you feel ready, you can sort of go again, essentially.
Yeah, and I think the lovely lesson here is that you were trying to start your own business. You were trying to go from 0 to 1 for a long time, and you weren't quite getting to the 1, and then you got to the 1 with that one business you had for about 6 months. But now you're in this process of taking a business from, say, like 5 to 10 or 5 to 6. You know what I mean? You're kind of really taking something that's running and making it run more efficiently. But one thing that, I think the listener would be kicking me if I didn't ask you about this is, how do you find the money? Finding the business is clearly something that, anybody could do. But how do we finance these deals? Because from my understandings, you don't come from a rich family or anything like that where you could have just borrowed a quick million from your parents. How are you finding the money to do these things, Adrian?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'm always asked that, and I love sharing the answer to this. Before I do, I just want to touch on something you said, because I think it's a really insightful point you've touched on there. One thing I've recognised, and I don't hear many people talk about this, which is why I feel the urge to talk about this, is that for me, an entrepreneur, like it's cut from one cloth. Like, an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. But what I've learned is that that's not technically true. There's different grades, there's different types of entrepreneurs out there. I was a terrible startup entrepreneur, but I'm quite a good acquisition entrepreneur. There's people who are very good at going from 0 revenue to $1 million revenue. I'm more the person who's good at going from $1 million, $1.5 million revenue up to 5, maybe even 10. And I know that that's kind of where I stop, because there's also other entrepreneurs who are very good at going in at 10 million, taking it up to 50. And I think it's a key insight that if you are a business owner or entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur listening to this, is to ask yourself, well, where am I on that? Am I more of a startup entrepreneur, or actually am I more of a latter stage of a business's growth? Because there's different skill sets required for each. And my problem was that I was a square peg trying to fit into a round hole, like the startup hole, for so many years, and that was a big reason for the failure, if not the main reason for the failure. So recognizing that is very important. But back to the main question, how do I finance these? So I have done, I think it's 9 acquisitions now, and I haven't financed any of them with my own money. My first few, I simply didn't have the money, and I quickly learned that acquiring businesses is risky, because when you are, say, buying a house, you've got something to show for it. You've got bricks, mortars, you've got windows, your door, you've got something physical to show for it. But when you're buying a business, particularly a small business, you're essentially buying contracts, and you're essentially buying not people, like you can never own another person, but you've got people organised within that invisible sort of infrastructure. But the problem is with small businesses is that when you acquire a business, like there will be some people who would have been there for far too long, and they just will not, no matter what you say, they just do not want to listen. They're out of the door. Now, quite a sizable small business is, say, 10 people. That's a good size small business. But 2 of those people leave, that's 20% of your workforce. So all of a sudden, as a small business, you're trying to operate on 20% of the workforce in a business you don't know or understand. That's a very risky place to be in. The second thing is that in principle, you're buying contracts, but the reality is most of the small businesses don't have contracts, and if they do have contracts, they're not worth the paper they're written on. So I have lost count of it, and it's terrible to say it, but the amount of small businesses I've looked at, and I've looked at hundreds, where they don't have employment contracts, and if they do have employment contracts, these are like the templated ones you get for like $20 a month subscription, that you get access to 1,000 different legal templates. And so it's a very risky place. So even if I had a bucket load of money, like in those earlier days, it would have been foolish of me, absolutely foolish of me to use that. Instead, the trick to this is it's all about structuring the deal in a way in which you're minimizing your risk, but also you're doing it alongside the seller. It's kind of bringing your chair around to their side of the table because they want to leave, and you need to understand what their real motivations are for leaving, because it's almost always non-financial. They're not leaving because they want the big paycheck, although they expect that, but actually the real reason they're leaving, when you dig into it, is because they've just had a close family member unexpectedly pass away, and it shook them and made them realise they've been doing this for 20 years, they've got 10 years left of their working career, they want to try something different, and it's understanding that so that you can structure in a way that is truly win-win, like truly win-win. So I've never used like a penny of my own money, quite simply because for a long time I didn't have any.
Yeah, so seller-side financing, where you're coming in and going, hey, this business is making X amount in profit, I'll be willing to split that with you 50-50 for the next, let's say, year, 6 months or whatever else, or when I do finally fix this up and sell it on, you'll get an equal portion of, the representative value in the future type thing.
Yeah, it's more a case of, so we value the business at X, and I mean, my last acquisition, the price on paper of hundreds and hundreds of thousands, but I'm not paying like significant amounts of money on day one, like it's just not happening. So it's more a case of, this is the price we agree, so you're going to get this money. However, there are the payments of this is going to be deferred over a period of time, and if anything comes up that is impacting the business, then we agree that that's going to come off the money that's owed. And I'll give you an example here of the type of things that can happen. So my last acquisition, there were so many things. There was I got into it, and about 2 weeks in, I received a letter from HMRC saying the business had overclaimed on furlough payments during COVID and had to immediately repay £16,500. I mean, this was before my time, so that came off the consideration. This one situation is wound me up more than anything else. They had a large customer accidentally pay an invoice twice, a £20,000 invoice twice, and the previous owners didn't send back the payment for the second £20,000 payment. They just didn't say anything, and so eventually the customer realised, it's a big business, they realised, they came knocking saying, hey, you owe us £20,000, or show an invoice saying that we owed this, which they knew they didn't, and they didn't. And so it's like, well, who should pay for that? And so that's why you structure it in that way, and owners recognise that, because it's, yes, they would like all the money, but also what they really want is to run away from a lot of the problems, and just to not be on their shoulders. Because when you buy a business, believe me, you are going into a world of problems, and there are other people's problems that you're going in to try and solve. So
Yeah, no, okay, that makes sense then. So structuring the deals is very important and structuring it in a way that benefits the seller. But for you as somebody who's looking for businesses, you said you're looking for a business that's, not quite on the verge of bankruptcy or quite on the verge of shutting down, but they're on that kind of slow trajectory, not down, but do you know what I mean? As in things aren't working out so well. Where do you kind of find these deals, and what is the kind of thing that you see that's a common problem in all these businesses, just in case the listener is thinking of doing something similar?
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a place now where these deals tend to find me. At the start, that wasn't the case. It was like anything; you have to be proactive. You have to go out there. You have to sort of knock on doors and say, "Hey, I'm interested," and have a lot of conversations until you start to find those type of businesses. But even then, you don't really know what type of businesses you're looking for. So it's all just like a learning curve. But now these businesses tend to come to me. The owners tend to be in a place where they know there's problems. They're not expecting, say, a massive payday from it. What they want more than anything else is just a quieter life. They want to hand these problems over to be able to walk away with the head held high, that they can very justifiably say they sold their business. A lot of these businesses, they will have people problems. So I'm yet to see a small business that hasn't employed at least one family member or close friend. The last one I had a son, a wife, best mate, and a couple of kids from a couple of people who they've known like since sort of school days in the business. So there's a recipe for disaster, and a lot of the problems are stemming from those people. But as the owner, it's very hard to fire your wife, and it's very hard to fire your best mate. And so being able to step away from that and someone like me come in and be able to start ripping off the plasters, it gives them a way out, and an amicable way out. So yeah, that's the common situation. The other common problem, it's a big problem, is the financial side, which is probably no great surprise. The last business, I don't say it's in any form of disrespect, but it was the wife who was running the finances, and she spent her sort of career working as a dinner lady for 20 years, and then was sort of pulled into the business by her husband because he was desperate, and complete hats off. She just rolled her sleeves up and got stuck in with no qualifications, no training, no real handover. The handover was, she told me, was basically, here's a box of papers, like crack on with it. And in that context, she'd done a great job, but it wasn't sufficient for a small business. So that's a big one as well. The finances in the team is really important, and you can solve a lot of stuff with those, but it does bring up problems when you start sort of talking to people. And I mean, yeah, the current acquisition, I had people stealing, I've had people lying. That's caused major problems. That's cost the business, and you have to deal with that. Puts them out of place. They've never been confronted in that way before, and some of them can be quite spiteful as well. So yeah, but that comes with the territory, I guess. So.
Yeah, cool. So we've got the kind of basics of buying and selling businesses, but on one side over here, you're building an empire. That you said that you're buying businesses, you're not trying to sell them. Talk to me about the kind of economies of scale or the benefits of having this group. How does it become cheaper? How does it work better having this group or this conglomerate of childcare businesses or child focused businesses?
Yeah, so I mean, two of our companies are franchise networks, so they're children franchises, and between them we have around 70 franchisees across the UK, Ireland, a couple in Australia, and even the Middle East. Now, one of the challenges of children's franchise networks is that the compared to say like a McDonald's or a Domino's, the food and beverage, like the ticket values are much lower. So you've got people paying £5 for a class compared to £20 as an average order for a pizza, and yeah, you've got different costs in there as well. But it puts the children's franchisor in a position where they start to hit glass ceilings in terms of profit and income producing capabilities quite quickly. But when you start bringing these together, they've got the same functions. It's recruiting franchisees, it's supporting franchisees. So you can start to bring those together and have one franchise recruitment person, but selling 2 or 3 different brands. And in many ways, it works even better, because if someone inquires about one brand and the location's already taken, then the recruiter can say, well, wait a minute, we've also got these 2 brands where the location that you want is available. Should we talk about that? So you've got the cost saving plus the synergy of being in that position, and it's the same across like the support function and other components of the business. So when you start putting them together, they very quickly start to become a lot more profitable, and it puts you in a situation which we're not quite there yet, but we're moving towards it now, where we have our blueprint, we have the infrastructure, and now it's looking for, say, younger brands or other brands that fit into like the social purpose of what we're doing. So they provide services that complement the other services that we provide, and ultimately, shape the development of the child. But because we have the infrastructure that this younger brand can't, we can plug them in and blow them up quite quickly. So from an acquisitions perspective, I'm currently looking at a couple of those deals, sort of younger brands, where we can plug them into our framework and sort of grow it from there.
Lovely. Well, Adrian, you kind of have had this thread throughout the whole kind of conversation here about purpose, and having a purpose is what can guide you in the right direction. And you're quite big on, let's say, endurance events, fitness. Talk to me, briefly about what those look like for you. Are you an ultra marathoner? Are you a CrossFitter? What does that look like for you, and why do you do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I done I got into this, and people look at some of the stuff I do recently and they never understand how it started. So I done my first event, which was a half marathon, because I was living that crazy student lifestyle, and I was out sort of like drinking, and I was like really down, and I just didn't really know what was going on. I felt I needed to do something good for myself, so I signed up for a half marathon, and I done that, and I enjoyed it, and I was like, oh well, maybe I could do a marathon. So that led to doing the marathon. It was the London Marathon, and then after that I was like, yeah, I still really enjoyed that, maybe I could do a triathlon. And so it then went on to doing the London triathlons, like sort of year after year. And then I done the London triathlon, and I done it in a time much faster than I thought I would. And I came out of that actually feeling quite elated, like, yeah, this is really cool. Maybe I could do an Ironman. And I had this idea that I could, but I didn't do anything with it for years. And it was when I was in my about 26, 27. And again, I was in this cycle of like self-abuse from like alcohol and living a terrible lifestyle, trying to get these startups going, failing and feeling deflated. And I was like, I'm gonna do something good for myself, like I did back at the beginning, and I'm gonna sign up for an Ironman, and I'm just gonna go for it. And I had 3 months to train, and I done it, and I loved it. But again, after that, feeling on a natural high, I didn't decide, but I just didn't do anything for a long time after, because I couldn't afford anything else. Like I had to beg, borrow and steal a bike, and I didn't even have running trainers when I'd done it. I was just had nothing, like from a financial perspective. And then it was probably about 18 months ago when I was having a bit of a difficult time with anxiety, actually, and I just wanted to do something for me that wasn't business focused, that was, and I mean this in the nicest way, but it wasn't family focused. It was just something for me. And so I'd always liked the idea, having done the Ironman, that was my last major event, of doing something a bit more adventurous, and ideally that combined in the travelling. So I ended up doing an event which was running, cycling and kayaking across Scotland, which was phenomenal, and I loved it, and I felt so alive. And that led to just sort of bigger and bigger stuff. So in March of this year, I was in the Arctic Circle on a multi-day endurance event. We camped out in minus 17 degrees Celsius, and we woke up the next morning, and we ended up climbing. It wasn't on our plan to do it, but we ended up climbing this mountain in what turned out to be, sunny when we started and a storm by the time we got to the peak. And that was an incredible experience. In June of this year, I've done a 70-mile ultra marathon across North England, so from east to west. In November of this year, I'm participating in the Spartan races, so participating in the World Championship in Sparta in Greece, which I'm super excited about. And next March, I'm heading to Panama for a 14-day jungle trek from literally like the west coast to the east coast, or east to west, one of the two. And I do them because it's put me on this path of better understanding myself. And every time I do these events, I'm like every time I do them, I come away and all of this good stuff happens in every other area of my life as well. And I know it's connected, and I know it's because I'm breaking down personal barriers, like mental barriers and physical barriers, and it's just having a knock-on effect to that. And so more than anything else, it's piqued my curiosity, like what else could I do? So I'm 38 next week actually, but for my 40th, I've already earmarked that I want to go to the South Pole. Like, I'm determined to go to the South Pole for my 40th. I've got no idea how I'm going to do it, no idea I'm going to fund it or anything like that, but that's my goal. At some point I will run across America. I don't know when. Like, I've got a young family, you can't just take like 3 months off, but it's just giving this whole new lease of life that's adding a significant amount in other areas, because I'm coming back a more fuller and refreshed person, which makes me a better dad, makes me far more better, like going into children's businesses, because I'm filling my cup first, at which point I can start filling others.
Yeah, that's 100% right, because I was working with a very kind of, I wouldn't say big or well-known personal trainer, but a personal trainer. And he said, a lot of people think that, oh, I don't have time to exercise because I need to do this, I need to do that. It's like, actually, the better care you take of yourself is the better person you can be to all these people you care about, which is, 100% true. And it's something that you just said there. So you're doing all these things to kind of improve yourself and become a better person. And one thing that we haven't really spoken about in this whole conversation is kind of, what you do and why you do it in a kind of a totalitarian kind of sense of why do you do what you do and why does it bring you joy? So the question I want to ask you is, what is it about what you do that brings you the most joy?
In all honesty, there's like two sides of the same coin here. Is on the first side, it's about the self-discovery. So from a personal level, it's about the self-discovery. It's not about making money or doing this. It's that self-discovery. Like, in many ways, I'm still trying to figure out who I am as I was when I had that nervous breakdown at 19. I'm still trying to figure that out, and I keep surprising myself and learning new things, and I don't think that will ever stop. I'm starting to realise, and but that's exciting, because you just want to keep pulling back the layers and pulling back as many as you can before you can't pull back anymore, so that's on the one side. And on the other side, it's of all the travelling, of the success from a business perspective, certainly of the failures, just sort of everything, I've found the most fulfillment in the most basic form of being of service. And I know that might sound a bit woolly, but just being of service to someone else it gives a level of fulfillment I've never quite experienced. And that's in the context of having travelled over 45 countries, having done some pretty cool stuff in like the Arctic Circle and that sort of stuff. Like, that is amazing, and I'm so grateful to have had those opportunities. But nothing has quite reached that very basic thing of being of service. And it could be as simple as opening the door for someone, but genuinely doing it with an intent of, let me get that for you. Like, it's okay, you don't need to struggle. Like, I want to help here. And so that is a new sort of phase of life I could feel myself coming into, something that I want to embrace quite deeply, and to just see where that goes.
Where can the people find you online?
I'm very active on Instagram. My handle is Adrian J Knight. with a K. And I love getting messages from people. I love hearing what people are up to, like what they're struggling with, and just listening and learning about people really. And if I can provide any support or advice, it's always great to do so.
Thank you for listening to People Explained. New episodes come out every Monday. We would appreciate it if you gave us a review on Apple Podcasts and shared this episode with a friend.